The wife longed for more, and today's story follows a similar thread. Enjoy the tale. I woke up feeling uneasy in my stomach. One hand was placed on my hip, the other trying to encroach upon my private space. I was suffering from an intense headache, one that I was sure wasn't a result of last night's drinks. "CJ, darling, mornings aren't my favorite," I murmured. "Oh, sorry," he responded, his voice carrying a trace of letdown. "But didn't you, oh?" NCT tells stories about how you and Mark would be affectionate all night and into the following day. That was at age 20, I answered, showing a bit of annoyance. At 20, when you're madly in love, you live off passion, oh, he said, his voice laden with sorrow. He looked like a saddened puppy, and I started to wonder if I was erring. On paper, everything appeared perfect for me. I was moving away from a 40-year-old who spent his days working, only to come home and fiddle with his car, to a 30-year-old who worshipped me. Mark was dedicated to his job, accumulating wealth for what he saw as our future. CJ, meanwhile, was committed to me. Mark, while never overbearing or harsh, would often argue with me. If I held my position, setting a firm limit, he would just flash me an odd smile and leave. It shouldn't have been like this. When my mother wanted something, my father obeyed as he should. Eventually, he grasped the frequently echoed adage, "Happy wife, happy life." Then Mr. Mark Clayton would give me a look suggesting I was being unreasonable. If I decisively refused him intimacy, he would simply shrug and spend more time on his car. I loathed that Mustang intensely. The lack of closeness seemed to turn him into an endless talker, or so my mother suggested. However, a few days into my standoff, he began to check his watch often. It's a good thing women are more observant than men, otherwise I would have been oblivious. I spotted a calendar in our kitchen with a big red circle around the upcoming weekend, and the days leading up to it, including the circled one. It didn't make sense until I found a pamphlet for a luxurious brothel in Las Vegas in a sock drawer. The front of the pamphlet showed pictures of various women, all seemingly eager to satisfy my husband's wishes for free and competing for the opportunity to do so for payment. They were all quite young and beautiful. The discovery was almost too much to bear. What made me the angriest was that he had already marked off this day, and it wasn't even midday yet. I wasn't naive, and there was no way I would allow him to spend a night with professionals. I envisioned what would follow. He would have ignored my desires in less time than his Mustang could hit 60 mph, which was less than 5 seconds. So, that night, fully aware of what I wanted, I suggested we spend the night together. I was boiling with fury, and my emotions were deeply hurt. "No," he replied promptly, so swiftly it seemed like an afterthought, as if it was too trivial to even consider. I was sure steam was coming out of my ears when things escalated. "Come on, Mark, it's already been a week," I argued. "I'm just not feeling it," he said. "I could caress your manhood," I offered with a smile, attempting to look amiable. It was hard, especially since my utmost desire was to cut off his manhood and throw it into the fireplace. "Please, darling, let me satisfy you," I implored. I'm not sure, he pondered as though thinking it over. "You're not adept at this. It feels like you're in a hurry to get it over with. Maybe wait another week." I was shocked, and this had always been our routine. I tried all the tricks I learned from TV magazines and my mother to gain the upper hand, but Mark consistently seemed to hold the edge. CJ, by contrast, cherished me. I was his goddess. Merely uttering a command to jump would make him spring into action. What kept me from leaving Mark for CJ? There are two main reasons. First, at my core, I hold affection for Mark. I abhor his dedication to work, I detest his commitment to responsibility, and I hate that he never yields to others. The second reason is far simpler. CJ, despite his fervent worship and tender touches, earns just a meager salary, possibly the minimum wage, from his job at a bar. He's pleasant company and obeys every directive, yet he lacks the financial means to sustain me. Mark, the idiot I wed, brings home a 6-figure income, perhaps that explains his behavior. Indeed, things weren't always strained between us. Our initial meeting was marked by deep affection, but after 20 years and endless disputes, barriers have risen between us. As I pondered the transformation from perpetual love to constant longing and then to profound disdain, CJ broke into my reverie. He gently rubbed my legs, aiming to lift my spirits without annoying me. This act of leg rubbing used to thrill me immensely when Mark did it, however. CJ only managed to annoy me. CJ, come closer and touch my chest, I ordered him sternly. He inhaled sharply in excitement, nodded, and quickly moved toward me. I chose not to mention that his leg massages were irritating and disrupting my train of thought. Meanwhile, my large, surgically enhanced breasts had largely lost nipple sensation. Mark was the only one who could make that area feel pleasurable. Another grievance I held against that fool: his prowess in bed was unparalleled, and his physical attributes were notably superior to CJ's. Mark always left me quivering intensely. It seemed unlikely he had never strayed. It seemed even more improbable that he truly loved me and continues to do so. This must be hard for him, but it's beneficial as it means I could always go back to him if necessary. Actually, there wouldn't have been a need to leave Mark had he not been so adamant about winning every argument. Had he allowed me to dominate as I should have, we would have been far happier. In truth, if I had been in charge, I would have been a much happier wife and would have made him the happiest man. However, he annoyed me too frequently. It was CJ who made me realize my true power. He explained that in a divorce, the woman typically ends up with everything, while the man might end up back at his mother's, eating tuna directly from the can. CJ himself was with a woman who wished to marry him, yet she wasn't quite what he sought. They weren't married, so leaving her wouldn't pose a problem. Exactly. Oh no, today is the day you should call him, CJ murmured as he caressed my chest. Then I remembered the plan we had been crafting for weeks. We were waiting for the ideal time, and this week was perfect. It was perfect because Mark was away. It was perfect because both CJ and I were too shy to confront my husband directly about leaving him and initiating a divorce. Just thinking about it nearly made me nauseous. I mean, I do possess a moral compass, and I found it repulsive to contact this man while he was out on business, laboring relentlessly to maintain the home I needed, for my car, all my apparel, the jewelry, and even the food I ate. Mark deserved better. He deserved an honest conversation about our relationship and our feelings. If we determined that our marriage was irretrievable, then we should investigate all possible solutions. Only afterward should we consider divorce, and following that, we would be free to explore new relationships. This would have been the correct approach, but we failed to manage it that way. Throughout our marriage spanning over 2 decades, Mark never hit me. He never even raised his voice during our disagreements. He always tried to find a compromise. This was one of my primary issues with him. He was overly accommodating. He was perpetually prepared to settle for less than everyone else. But when we couldn't find a compromise, he would simply flash a small, humorous smile and walk away. Over the years, I came to understand his thinking perfectly. I fully understood the meaning behind that look. It signified that if I didn't accept half, I would end up with nothing. It suggested, who would want a night with a 40-year-old when I could head to Vegas? Thus, over time, my frustration built, and I reached a stage in my life where I needed everything. Therefore, in a divorce, I would secure everything: my home, all my possessions, and a large portion of his finances. Furthermore, when he retires, I would also receive half of his pension. I sought advice from an attorney who prepared the divorce documents. I discussed it with my mother and several friends. They all thought it would succeed, yet they also agreed that I should not proceed. What irritated me was my mother, who had never liked Mark, calling me crazy for even thinking about divorcing him. However, their views only fueled my anger and strengthened my resolve. My attorney, primarily motivated by profit, crafted the reasons for the divorce. I planned to accuse Mark of mental cruelty and abandonment. The grounds for our divorce were that Mark, consumed by his work, had emotionally neglected me. It was a lie, and a silly one at that, but it would secure the autonomy and control over my life that I desired. Deep inside, I resented him for his ignorance, but life is tough and he's grown. He would bounce back in time. Besides, had I taken the time to talk things through with him, he might have tried to negotiate a compromise, or he could have dissuaded me from it. Sometimes you need to figuratively shake someone to get their attention. I felt like I was at a juncture in life where preemptive action was necessary. I inhaled deeply and picked up the phone. CJ sharpened his gaze on my unaware bud, seemingly pushing me onward. The sound of trucks came from behind the house, likely a neighbor getting a furniture delivery. I dialed a number that had become very familiar over the years. It rang once and then picked up during the second ring. It seemed like fate. He almost anticipated my call. "Mark?" I asked tentatively. Who else would it be? His terse reply made me feel slightly better about my actions. Why are you calling me? He queried, his tone making it sound strange or unexpected for me to contact him. After thinking it over, I acknowledged he was right. I hadn't called him for years, other than to ask for something for myself. This man had tirelessly worked to better our lives, and I had largely neglected him for a long time. Maybe what I wanted could actually benefit us both. Maybe I could let him keep a bit more of the money. After all, I didn't mean to hurt him. I just wanted to claim my independence. I'm your wife, I reminded Mark. I was so close. I was on my way to the promised land, and at the finish line, sweat dripped from my forehead onto the pale angel beneath me. She made a small, sharp sound and yanked my head back toward her. She pressed her lips hard against mine and tightened her hold on my male part even more with her soft hands. Oh, damn, I gasped. She laughed and kissed me again. Shannon, sweetheart, I can't hold back. I need to, I faltered. You have to hang in there a bit longer. Love, she murmured. It will be much better this way if you are. Oh my God, make me, each word emphasized by her pressing her body against mine. I tried my hardest to resist. Shannon had a way of pushing me to the brink so that I would collapse afterward. It was unbelievable that I had only met her 3 months ago. The ringing of my phone shattered my concentration. I crossed the finish line in such a way that I nearly fainted. I looked down to see Shannon's expression, and she was close to reaching a climax. Oh baby, this feels so wonderful, she whispered. What exactly are you trying to do to me, Shannon? I asked as my phone kept ringing. I want to make you happy, Mark, she said softly. I've been happy since the day we met, I responded. You're going to be even happier once we're done, she promised with a smile. Pick up the phone, it might be something important. It was the moving company. I had forgotten that they were supposed to call me when they arrived. Shannon began to excite me again, her touches reigniting my arousal. Suddenly, my phone rang once more. Seeing the familiar number on the display, I recognized it was her. I gave Shannon a nod, who gazed back at me expectantly. The look in her large green eyes was a mix of amusement and a cunning smile. As Shannon cuddled up next to me, I marveled once more at the work of art that was her body. Her legs were toned like those of a former dancer, and her heart-shaped buttocks would leave the Kardashians green with envy. Her narrow waist made her buttocks look even more prominent, although her buttocks were so round they seemed to fit a larger frame. Shannon often joked that God was so delighted with how he sculpted her body that he was too busy to bless her with ample breasts. I was in love once again. Indeed, it was only the second time, but this time it all felt perfect. This love was like a phoenix reborn from the remnants of the past. I think I should start at the beginning. 3 months earlier, I came across as a complete idiot. I was infatuated with a woman who detested me. We both knew it, yet I genuinely adored her and naively thought she reciprocated my feelings. Of course, I was aware of the problems in our marriage. We fought a lot at that time, but I believed this was normal for married couples. My perception changed when my secretary walked into my office and announced that I had a visitor. When Shannon entered my office and sat down, I was confused. Which company are you with? I questioned. I represent those who are out for vengeance against a company of fools, she answered. I don't follow, I admitted. I see you don't, Mark, and it seems this will hit you very hard, she declared. She shrugged her slim shoulders and continued. Your wife is having an affair. I thought I had misheard her, but when I looked at her face, she seemed so sure. She delivered the news as casually and straightforwardly as if she were merely stating that the sky was blue. At that moment, I sensed she was telling the truth. It hit me like a sledgehammer. Sweat formed on my forehead, and my heart pounded furiously. My vision began to blur at the edges, and tears started to well up in my eyes. I felt like I could vomit at any second. Images of a faceless man making her moan in pleasure filled my mind. Then the tears began to flow. I bowed my head on the table because, being a man, I did not want this petite, red-haired woman to see me weeping like a child. Before I knew it, I was enveloped in the scent of fresh cherries. Warm hands lifted my face from the table, and I was embraced by compassion. I'm so sorry, she apologized. I didn't expect this reaction. I thought you would react like I did when I found out. I thought you would get angry and confront my boyfriend. She sat next to me at my desk, cradling my head in her lap, gently stroking my hair, attempting to comfort me. "You do love her, don't you?" she asked, her head shaking. Despite her betrayal and lack of appreciation for you, do you still love her when all she talks about in bed is how you two argue and that you should listen to her? I really can't grasp why you continue to back her despite her lack of appreciation for you or your efforts. Why are you so invested in her?" she pressed on, stroking my hair and speaking out loud. Her tone was soothing, and it made me question if she was attempting to calm me down or simply talking to herself. "Is it because of her blonde hair and large breasts?" she inquired. "CJ has a thing for blondes with big breasts too." I expected more from you. Suddenly, I lifted my head to face her. I couldn't fathom why I became so furious. I loved her before her hair was blonde. I snapped back, and it was me who paid for that surgery. She simply responded with a peal of melodic laughter, which stopped me in my tracks. "What's so amusing?" I demanded. "I'm telling the truth, I understand, darling," she responded, "but my oblivious ex doesn't realize that his perfect woman is largely artificial. It must have been expensive to alter her like that." I shook my head. Everything seemed unreal. Yet my rage grew. Shannon revealed everything to me: how they met and his final plan. They considered their options and thought they had come up with an optimal plan to cut me out while keeping most of my assets. Shannon was in a similar but less legitimate situation. She backed CJ from the beginning, even though he was unfaithful repeatedly with women he met at the bar where he worked part-time. He was always searching for his ideal blonde with large breasts. Shannon employed a private detective to collect as much data on CJ as she could. I had several discussions with her agent, a woman called Sarah Price, before I decided to hire her. Getting this information was straightforward, but it turned out to be of little value to Shannon, as Sarah, another striking redhead, had often pointed out. Since Shannon and CJ were not married, this data didn't affect her directly. CJ was free to leave Shannon whenever without any legal consequences. Conversely, I could use Sarah and the videos to bolster my position in the divorce and reduce the sum I would need to hand over to her and her new partner. After weeks of surveillance and strategizing, Shannon and I grew closer. One evening, this led to a heartfelt discussion. "Shannon, you deserve better than him," I stated. "Why don't you just leave him?" "But I can't leave without consequences. I never let anyone take advantage of me." "Isn't it sufficient to know what he's up to prevent him from actually hurting you? Unlike me, you're not bound to him. You're young and lovely. You have the opportunity to find someone who will value you as you should be," I counseled. Her green eyes sparkled even in the dim light of my Mustang. "You finally noticed, did you?" she asked. "Noticed what?" I answered. She grinned. "I noticed you the moment you walked into my office," I blurted out. She laughed. "You were so enchanted you didn't even realize I was a woman, much less that I might be interested in you." Her laughter always captivated me. It was one of the things I valued most about her. "Why do you think I'm still here?" she said. "I ended things with CJ and any thirst for vengeance weeks ago. Helping you in your quest for revenge means far more to me than getting back at that idiot. I loathe the thought of you having to support those two imposters for the rest of your life. Surely there's a way out for us, love." She moved closer, wrapped her arms around me, and kissed me. For the first time, I was surprised, but I enjoyed it too much to think about stopping. At 40, having been married for 20 years, I thought I knew all about kissing, but the only thing I knew then was how unique kissing Shannon felt. The flavor was distinct. The feeling was unlike any I'd experienced before. The whole encounter was novel. I couldn't stop. We just kept kissing, and eventually we forgot we were supposed to be listening to the tape of our cheating partners. A voice from behind eventually broke us apart, but Shannon didn't let go of my hand. I anticipated this. I was hoping it would occur. Sarah said with a smile, "You two are so endearing, and you mesh better with each other than with your current partners. Now that you're a couple, we can just let the fraudsters go. They will eventually meet their fate. But what about his divorce and our vengeance?" Shannon inquired. Sarah caught us off guard when she explained a few legal matters. "The real question is whether you both want this enough to see it through," Sarah posed. "Consider it carefully. It's a major decision. I'll forward you the bill." The ensuing weeks were dedicated to crafting this scheme. Shannon and I sharpened our acting abilities, each of us telling our respective partners how busy we were with work, and surprisingly both believed it. Neither suspected that Shannon and I were acquainted, much less that we were forming a relationship. This allowed us more time together, and our initial attraction blossomed into profound love. One day I phoned Shannon at her office and declared I was prepared. I feel I need to be with you more, I expressed. We already see each other nearly every evening. Silly, she laughed over the phone. It's not sufficient, I countered. Yet we haven't slept together, she murmured, hinting she was at the office and didn't wish for anyone to overhear. A night with you would be incredible, I reassured her. You have no idea, she replied, but you realize my breasts aren't as large as your wife's, right? What does that matter, I answered. What makes a night magical is loving the person you're with and desiring to please them. That's when she nearly broke into tears, her voice trembling. It seemed she had been waiting for me to say those words. I love you too, Mark, and I assure you it will always be this way. You can have me whenever you desire. I am entirely yours, she affirmed passionately. I was stunned. Never had anyone declared their love for me so articulately and passionately. And no, I have never said anything like this to anyone else before, not even to that CJ. I wasn't bothered by it. I was just curious about how quickly we could move forward. We were executing Sarah's strategy. This morning's call was precisely what we had been anticipating. The ironic part of all this was that I genuinely believed fate played a role in bringing us together. As we plotted our tactics for several weeks, we took extreme care to avoid being seen together. Yet friends common to both of us continuously suggested our partners were cheating. We painstakingly pretended to be unaware. It was almost a farce worthy of Shakespeare. It seemed only CJ and I knew the full extent of our awareness, and this was because the two betrayers were convinced they were more cunning than anyone else. My supposed business trip finally arrived. Indeed, it was a fabricated business trip, but it served its purpose well. Luckily, Shannon's mother became ill at the same time, convincing the deceivers we were both absent, which facilitated that crucial phone call. Things didn't go as smoothly as we had hoped. Shannon and I expected the call would come on Friday night, which is why I had scheduled the truck for Sunday morning. I planned to give the lovers a few days of happiness before their world fell apart, but Shannon and I were savoring our moment of victory when I received the call. Mark, the voice of the woman I had been married to for over 2 decades, questioned. Who else would answer my phone? I replied cheerfully. Shannon approached and hugged me, giving me strength I never knew I had. Why the hell are you calling me? I demanded. I am your wife, she asserted. Mark, dear, I need to tell you something and you may not like it. I think the easiest way to explain is to say that in the long run, this will be better for us both. It might not appear so now. She continued, but I erupted in laughter, and so did he. I couldn't understand why he found this amusing. CJ went downstairs to check on the damn trucks. I thought they were in my yard. I wished CJ had been with me then. Why the hell are you laughing? I asked. I'm serious, she countered. Well, someone recently informed me that you planned to push me aside, he replied, maintaining his jovial tone. His ability to aggravate me was remarkable. Soon you'll be the one regretting it, I silently vowed, and that was the essence of it this time. I've got news for you, he went on, and it will be revealed shortly. Then, you'll be eating alone. What are you even saying? I demanded. I don't believe this was your doing, he laughed. I suspect it's all CJ's doing. Indeed, he was aware of your and CJ's involvement, he alleged. He had overheard some locals talking about it, probably my nosy neighbors. I needed to free myself from this situation. No matter, I'm proceeding with it. Mark, I'm leaving you, I stated, trying to sound as determined as possible, yet his laughter only grew louder. The letter I had written made me stop and think. It appeared he was driven to reconcile. His laughter chilled me. Did this fool have foresight? No one knew about that letter, not even CJ knew I had written it to Mark. The letter was supposed to accompany the divorce documents and clarify my thoughts on our marriage and the mistakes we had committed. It precisely outlined what Mark must do to win me back from CJ. Mark, we need to talk, I whispered. I think we should have this conversation when you get home. Just keep this in mind, my love. When you look up at the sky, he crooned, you may see the stars yet overlook the light. Mark, are you eating? I inquired, shocked. I had called him to end things, and here he was singing. He pretended joy upon hearing of my departure, trying to unsettle me. Mark, unless things change, we are on the path to divorce, I announced. Oh, it's already too late for that, my dear, he faltered, his voice tinged with sadness. In the background, a woman's faint voice insisted she was the only one who should call him sweet. Mark, it's never too late, I asserted. Why do you say it's too late, Mark? And who is? That woman with you, because I'm already gone, I exclaimed, feeling a surge of empowerment as I sang this anthem of triumph. What do you mean you've already left? I screamed into the phone now. The anxiety that had been building all morning now overwhelming me. It was like the dread Wile E. Coyote experiences just before the boulder he dislodged looms over him. I strained to hear Mark's response, but all I heard were beeps. Annoyed, I threw the phone onto the bed just as CJ burst into the room, his expression fraught with urgency. You need to get dressed and come downstairs, he implored. I wrapped myself in a robe, making sure it was securely fastened to avoid any embarrassment. A tall, authoritative woman occupied my living room, tablet in hand, commanding the space. Who are you? Get out of my house, I demanded. She sized me up briefly, then turned away dismissively. I'm being magnanimous today, she commented. I understand your predicament is difficult, but I won't accept rudeness or delays. I'm not going anywhere, I shot back. This house belongs to us, and it's almost paid off actually, she confirmed. CJ has contacted the authorities. It will speed up the process. The house isn't nearly paid off, it's completely settled. This could be your most embarrassing moment, she warned. I observed her as CJ called 911. The ensuing moments felt like an eternity, giving me time to reflect. Then I remembered Mark's reference to a victory song. What victory was he claiming? Shortly thereafter, Hank, the police chief and a friend of ours, arrived. The woman handed him some papers, which he examined with several nods. Then he turned to me, looking at CJ. Is this the man, he inquired. Who, I responded, irritated. Don't be upset, he suggested. I'm just verifying if he's the one you were involved with. It's rather bold to have him here in Mark's house. I forgot Mark sold the house, he blurted out. My mind spun before I could absorb his statement. A cheerfully intrusive woman pushed past the movers. Is this him, she asked, examining CJ, and then smiling at me. They said you were naive, but I had to see it for myself. What do you mean by that, I retorted sharply. Many women wonder why you would replace your husband with someone who is less well endowed and less affluent, she said with a sneer. The notion that silicone implants could decrease intelligence seemed almost believable. Focus, Tina, the chief said, as he approached CJ and sarcastically questioned him about masculinity. Confused, CJ answered that he didn't know. How could you know? Both the chief and the portly woman laughed loudly. Shall we continue? The woman asked, wiping away her tears of laughter. Continue, the chief agreed. Pack your belongings and go. Mark has sold the property, he stated bluntly. He can't do that. I objected. This is my home. I chose him, but he paid, the chief clarified. He purchased it by himself. Only his name is on the deed. He has the right to do whatever he wants with it. A woman doesn't always keep the house in a divorce, I stated emphatically. Not always, the chief concurred, and you two aren't even divorcing. True, I acknowledged. I intend to file for divorce tomorrow. You should have done so last week. That's when he sold the house, the boss chuckled. Is this even legal? I asked. No. The chief replied. It's quite crafty and deceitful, like cheating with someone slim while your spouse is out earning money to maintain everything, but it's not against the law. Darn, I muttered under my breath. CJ, call my lawyer. I need to talk to the bank and our investment company. Take that call outside, instructed the dark-complexioned woman. She motioned with her hand, and her team started to remove the furniture from the house. Where are they taking my furniture? I demanded. Your husband donated the furniture to a local charity auction, but she explained. You can buy it back if you wish. I selected each piece here, organized it, and started thinking perhaps you should have paid for it. Tina laughed. Oh right, I forgot. Hair bleach affects your cognitive abilities, doesn't it? I ignored her remark and focused on my phone. Conversation with the bank. Carly, this is Clayton. Yes, Mark's wife. My lawyer will be contacting you shortly to freeze all our accounts, so I need to withdraw the funds first, I stated into the phone. Carly, always upbeat, responded. Carly, let's handle one thing at a time. We'll talk later. I need enough funds to maintain the house and cover expenses for some time, and once the freeze is in effect, are only the current account funds frozen, or can Mark redirect his direct deposit elsewhere? Only the existing funds are frozen, she answered, but I think he already rerouted his direct deposit last week. When he quit his job, what did he do? I exclaimed, alarmed. Oh, Carly, I want to withdraw all the money from our accounts. I want to transfer all of it to a new account, I declared resolutely. Are you sure you want to take everything she questioned? Definitely, I confirmed. Mark will find a job faster than Tina can eat a plate of chicken wings, but this money is all I have until the divorce is settled. I'll need to write you a check for that amount, and then you must deposit it into your new account, she instructed. Fine, I snapped. Just go ahead, it's done, she assured. As soon as you get here, I'll hand you a check for $311, and you can deposit it. What are you talking about, Carly? I yelled. There was nearly $500,000 in this account. There was, she began. I know how much was there, I hissed. That's exactly what happened last week, Chief. This must be illegal, I asserted. It's not illegal, he responded, but it's certainly appalling indeed, he added. The bank has a minimum balance requirement. If your balance drops below $50, you'll be charged a $10 fee. But you don't have enough funds left even to cover the fee. CJ handed me the phone, and I started talking to my lawyer in a rush of words and tears. I told him how Mark had sold the house and drained all the funds from our bank accounts. As I spoke, I logged into our investment account and discovered that Mark had liquidated all our investments, leaving only one share in the cheese company. That's extremely clever, my lawyer noted. He outsmarted you. All of this is perfectly legal until the divorce proceedings start. He can do whatever he wishes with his assets. So he took everything. He's likely going to liquidate it all and move it to various offshore accounts that we can't reach. His plan is to accumulate so much capital that in the divorce you won't receive anything. And quitting his job is a clever move. When he shows up in court without any money or job, you two will simply separate with no financial ties. I don't think he'll show up at all, I said. I think he's left town. I think he's left me. Hey, my lawyer asked, how do you plan to serve papers to him if you don't know where he is? Is there a way to divorce him without all this? I asked, what about desertion in this state? It takes 3 years. Do you have enough money to last that long? He questioned. Remember, I just told you he took all our money, you idiot, I retorted. Wow, he replied. No money means you can't pay me. Click. And once again, all I heard were beeps, but now with the added sound of the movers snickering at me. That's how my life spiraled downward. I temporarily moved to my mother's house. Mark was thorough. He sold or gave away all our possessions. He took all 3 cars, his 2 Mustangs, and the Jeep he drove in winter were missing. He kept my new Lexus, but I couldn't afford it, and it was quickly repossessed. I sought advice from several pro bono attorneys, and they all told me how angry I must be to drive him to do what he did. Most of the lawyers, after hearing the details, admitted it was clever and perfectly legal. No law in the country requires a man to live with a woman just because they are married, nor is there a law against selling a property that you legally own, and Mark had every right to withdraw money from our accounts since he was the one who opened them. He was back in charge. I tried calling him but found his number was no longer in service. There was a hint. There I was sure he had left me a message I was too naive to understand. Days turned into weeks without any news from him. The weeks turned into months. I lost CJ before the first month was up. He struggled to pay rent on the apartment he shared with his girlfriend. Then he found a note his girlfriend had left him for another man the same day Mark left me. What were the odds of that? One day while listening to the radio, I suddenly burst into tears. There was a band I knew little about called the Eagles. One of their lead singers, a man named Glenn Frey, sang a song called Already Gone. It told a story so similar to mine that it made me cry. The nonsense that Mark had said or sung to me that day when he left me with his preemptive strike were directly from this song. My whole life was filled with hard work. I worked 6 days a week cleaning hotel rooms with my mother. Many of our guests reminded me of how I used to live. I always took for granted what I had. I always thought I deserved more. And after just a few days of working just to get by, I began to regret the way I treated my husband. I hated remembering that I used to spend more on makeup than I now earn in 2 weeks. I also realized that at 43 my opportunities were limited. The only odd thing was that after 3 years of poor diet and hard work, I had gained a few pounds. I also stopped coloring my hair. One day when I got home, an invitation was waiting for me. The next day I was invited to a local cafe. The invitation was unsigned, but I knew it was from Mark. Suddenly it all made sense. Mark might have drained our funds, but he left a strange amount of money. He left $311. It had been 3 years, 1 month, and 1 week since he left me. That's it, my sentence was over, my repentance was complete. Damn, I wish I had thought of this sooner. I could go on a diet and get back in shape, then I realized it didn't matter. Mark always loved me. Blonde hair and big breasts were my ideas while I tried to look my best. Suddenly, something dawned on me. I abruptly remembered the last line of the song that Mark had recited to me before he hit me and left me. I could try to divorce him, since it often happens that we live in constraints without realizing that we possess the key. There was a clue in the invitation. It stated we were back at the beginning. I was certain this meant he was ready to welcome me back into his life. It soon dawned on me that I had misunderstood. I had always been in control of the situation. I spent my days lounging while Mark went out and worked tirelessly to obtain everything I desired. The only time he refused my request was when I forced him into something he disliked, and when I attempted to divorce him. When I chose to leave him, he took it personally, as he usually does. He fulfilled my request. He left first. Strangely, I had feared the day when the inevitable would happen for the last 3 years. I was sure that eventually the divorce papers would surface, but they never did. I was quite sure I now understood why Mark still loved me. I looked forward to seeing him again. I arrived at the bar a little early. There was a disheveled-looking bartender who had drunk too much and showed that reddened face typical of a drunkard. He came to my table. "Damn, you've put on weight," he commented. "How many donuts have you had in the last 3 years? Have you drunk enough to forget how small your manhood is?" I asked. "What are you doing here?" "CJ, I still work here," he answered. "What are you doing here?" "I had been invited to dine at a humble street cafe opposite," I explained. "I came here to drink to gather bravery." "This is strange," he noted. "This is too great a coincidence." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I have an invitation too," he revealed. "Hey, did yours contain a strange riddle?" "I wouldn't call it a riddle," I responded. It was Mark's way of showing he wanted me back. "What exactly did it say?" I urged him. "If you really want to know," I told him, "it reads, we've come full circle. I'm ready to give you what you want." "You're correct," he acknowledged. "Yours is different from mine. My invitation asked a question: why does a squirrel hide its nuts in its nest?" "I'm not sure what that means," I declared. "I think it means Shannon wants me back too," he suggested. "The squirrel hides nuts in its nest to protect them from birds." I realized that in England, birds mean women. This was Shannon's way of indicating she didn't want me mingling with other women. I suspect they planned together and decided to reconcile us after some time. They wanted us to endure and be prepared to welcome them back on their terms. "To hell with all this," I exclaimed, anger making me disregard all I had learned in the past 3 years. If Mark wants me back, he'll have to earnestly apologize. For a long time with this thought, I stormed out of the bar, filled with anger, and crossed the street to the cafe. I sat at a tiny table and scanned the area. I actually saw CJ enter the cafe. He chose a small table on the sidewalk next to where 2 college students were playing hacky sack. Just as CJ sat down, I pondered his riddle and realized he was wrong. I waved frantically at him, but he was too captivated by the young men. Then he spotted me. He signaled to me and shook his head, but I didn't understand his gesture. The guys beside him lost control of the hacky sack. It flew towards CJ and knocked over his glass. He stood up angrily just as the small bag fell off the table and landed in front of him. One of the young men came over, seeming to attempt to skillfully kick the bag back into the air to restart the game. He swung his leg hard and missed the bag. Thankfully, the bag remained unbroken. His foot, however, slammed into CJ's groin with all his might. CJ's yell was so loud I was convinced it could be heard a mile away. I approached him just as the servers tried to help him. All they could do was assist him to stand, yet none attempted to check the site of his injury. I reached him just as the ambulance was taking him away. "Your answer was wrong," I told him. He looked at me through a veil of pain. What, he whimpered. "She didn't want you to return," I said. "This has nothing to do with birds. The squirrel stores its acorns. Acorns represent your reproductive organs, not a damn thing." He muttered. He began to speak again, but was interrupted by the arrival of a girl resembling a university student. She was tall and blonde, just as I had been. Her hair was a brilliant shade of blonde, and it was her natural hair color. Her bust size was almost equal to mine, and from their sway they appeared real. In her hand she held a briefcase and was popping gum. "Are you Anna Clayton?" she asked. Absolutely, I replied with an edge. She passed over a stack of papers. What's this, I asked, his demands. Why don't you ask him directly? You've been served, she stated. I looked around the cafe and then I saw him. At that moment I solved my mystery completely. Men, I got what I wanted, but it didn't mean I got Mark back. It meant I got what I aimed for while Mark left. I was divorced. The problem was, it wasn't what I wanted anymore. I missed the life I once cherished and had lost. Honestly, I was used to living with little money. Most importantly, I wanted to be back with Mark himself, and then I saw him. He looked fantastic, even better than at our breakup. He appeared happy, yet he wasn't alone. Accompanying him was a young, extremely beautiful, and noticeably pregnant redhead. A little girl who perfectly combined their features held both their hands. She had inherited Mark's hair color and her mother's bright green eyes. This young girl gave me a look with that familiar quirky smile Mark used to have. Maybe it's in the genes, or perhaps she understood what was unfolding and its implications, just as I had. Seeing them together, I realized it was definitively over. There was no way I could ever win Mark back emotionally. He was out of reach. There was no point in attempting to win his heart back. This redhead would never let him go. She had given him her love, her devotion, and her steadfast loyalty, along with their children. Looking over the divorce papers, I saw how Mark was getting back at me. My plan was to secure my husband's financial resources through legal means. I needed this man's fortune. In the end, I achieved neither. He had left me, divorcing me on the grounds that he had abandoned me, which meant he kept all his assets and his wonderful life. I raised my head from the papers for one last look at the man I had lost, but it was too late. He had already gone, and all I had left were tears. What do you think of our story today? I think the wife is completely wrong, because with Mark, she indeed had an ideal life, and with CJ, there's absolutely nothing to debate. What's your opinion? Comment below until the next videos.